In principle, you could figure out how to arrange your life. You could become wealthy enough and healthy enough. The ground truth of our contemplative lives has to be what is available to be noticed now. There is real freedom even in the midst of classically negative experience. Once again, experiences where there's less and less of you as the experiencer, and there's more and more of just the pure experience. And so that's tend to want in life, and they tend to find it in a haphazard way when they're pushed into some extremely narrow, unusual event. I mean, it can be kind of a peak experience. It could be a drug experience. It could be an emergency. It could be, watching television or watching film that becomes, for whatever reason, super captivating. People can disappear into their work where they're just, the hour flies by and you were unaware of what, it was kind of effortless. So there are glimmers of this state for people, but meditation is really the only activity where you are directly targeting this insight, that the insight that consciousness is this way already. It's not that the ego is really there and you successfully meditate it out of existence. You recognize that it's actually not there in the first place. And then, therefore, any experience, however mundane, even as something as boring as checking your email, can be an experience in which you recognize this once you know how to meditate. But when you think about that kind of experience, one is, it's totally appropriate to feel adrenalized, to feel fear, to feel anger, to feel that an emergency it has to be responded to, because in certain cases there is an emergency that has to be responded to. But the question is, how long do you want to be in the grip of one of those emotions in order to solve your problem, right? Like, is the problem that you've just noticed and reacted to and contracted around best solved in a state of contraction and fear and anger? And sometimes it might be. I mean, sometimes you might need just pure adrenaline to solve a situation, but those are super brief moments in life, and seconds later, you very likely want to be in a different state and need to be in a different state to function intelligently, because the alternative is panic in some sense. So it's not that I would say that the ideal is to never feel fear or anger or any classically negative emotion ever again, because for me they contain information, right? They reveal that something has just happened in the world that you really have to pay attention to. Once you experience that initial surge of adrenaline, it's not that useful to be lost in sort of catastrophic, implosion of self, where you're terrified, what you'd want to be. I mean, to take the self-defense analogy, it's like you'd want to be somebody who has been in this situation 1,000 times before. So how much fear is that guy going to be feeling in that moment? So insofar as you're not that guy, it's understandable that you might be super afraid, but I think everyone recognizes that the difference between being able to process, an emergency like that in a psychologically healthy way and being traumatized by it is a difference in just how long those emotions last, right? And what you're able to do when you remember the experience, a day later, a year later. And so much of psychological health and growth in any kind of spiritual practice is an ability to shorten the half-life of these negative emotions. So it's not that you never get angry again, but there's an enormous difference between being angry for 10 seconds and being angry for 10 hours or 10 days, and then acting on the basis of that negative emotion. So getting better at breaking the spell earlier and earlier is really everything. And once you can practice mindfulness, for lack of a better word, negative states of mind like fear and anger begin to function like mindfulness alarms. Whereas like you're going along, there's nothing out of the ordinary happening, and then suddenly something happens and you feel lousy, and say, some form of lousy. That becomes a goad to looking into the nature of consciousness and recognizing that there's no center to it, and that this next thought is a mere appearance in consciousness. And so rather than being taken in by this next thought that's rehearsing the reasons why you should be angry or should be afraid or should be anxious, you just see it as a thought, and it really is a kind of superpower. You can decide at that moment, is there any reason to stay angry here? And if the answer is no, you can actually get off the ride. And And yet getting off the ride is synonymous with recognizing that there's no one there on the ride in the first place, right? I mean, like it can sound paradoxical when I'm talking about it, but there is no one who is angry. There's just this appearance of there's just this change in the energy and the content of consciousness, and there was just the physiology of anger. The truth is, breaking the spell doesn't even require the contents of consciousness to change. Like they will change if you actually are no longer thinking about why you should be angry. But you can the moment you recognize that there's no center, that there's no subject in the middle of the anger, that there's no one who is angry, you can the physiology can, it'll take 10 seconds to dissipate, right? But even in that first second, you can recognize that there's just consciousness and its contents, and there's no center to it, and so you're already free even before there's been a change in the character of experience. So impermanence is really the central fact that we have to get our heads around to be motivated to look into any of these esoteric ideas, right? Because for impermanence, experience could be perfect. At least in principle, you could figure out how to arrange your life. You could become wealthy enough and healthy enough and kind enough and have enough, good friends who love you around you. You could be careful enough. You could maintain it all enough so that your well-being would be truly invulnerable, right? Like it's just that you could create a kind of paradise for yourself. But there's a problem with that. In the grossest sense, the problem is death, right? We all die. Like even if you're the luckiest one in the world and you're going to be healthy to 130, what is that synonymous with? That's synonymous with you being on the receiving end of lots of phone calls, learning that people close to you have died and disappeared, right? So you're going to lose everyone you love if you're too lucky to be the healthiest person right? Nothing lasts, right? That is the problem. That no matter how good experience gets, anything that wasn't here a moment ago and it suddenly appears, any state of mind that wasn't here a moment ago and suddenly appears, joy and, creative fulfillment and love and ecstasy and rapture. If it wasn't there a moment ago and it's here now, by definition, it will disappear, right? And so a durable form of well-being can't be predicated on the appearance of any change in the contents of consciousness, because nothing lasts, right? What you will be left with, by definition, is a memory of that experience. And rehearsing that memory is itself a transitory experience that you can only extract so much joy from. Most people are seeking happiness, seeking insight, seeking fulfillment, seeking some stable basis of feeling good in a context in which everything is changing, right? And there's just no way to secure an experience that is so good that it becomes truly indelible and it becomes the person you now are, moment by moment, thereafter.